through Marr.
Good evening. Let's begin by trying to get this straight. Donald Trump is today threatening the future of NATO because other countries, including this country, haven't sent warships to keep open the Strait of Hormuz after his war blocked it. This comes after he insulted British troops. 457 of them died in Afghanistan alongside the Americans, but Trump said they stayed a little off the front lines. This comes after Trump insulted Keir Starmer for not joining a war he started by allowing British bases from day one. This is not Winston Churchill we are dealing with. A war Starmer was never consulted about and which he believes to be illegal. This comes after Trump said that any British naval deployment was too late anyway, and we don't need people that join wars after we've already won. But today, in an interview with the Financial Times, comes a somewhat different take. People who are beneficiaries of keeping the strait open, said Trump, a category you could also define as the world economy, should help make sure that nothing bad happens there. Quoting him once more, "If there's no response, or if it's a negative response, I think it will be very bad for the future of NATO." So it is us he's talking about. To sum up, you are cowards, you're too late, you aren't needed, I've won. And then, this afternoon, he doubles down.
And when we want to know, do you have any minesweepers? Well, would rather not get involved, sir. I said, for 40 years we're protecting you, and you don't want to get involved in something that is very minor. Very few shots going to be taken because they don't have many shots left. But they said, we'd rather not get involved. I just want the fake news media and everybody else to remember that that was said because I've been a big critic of all of the protecting of countries because I know that we'll protect them. And if we ever needed help, they won't be there for us. I've just known that for a long period of time.
Sorry, but this is incoherent. Iran, he had just said, had been literally obliterated. But now he needs help to keep the waterways open. Doesn't add up. Now he's saying to us, you're not too late. You are needed. And it appears from the fine print that so far I haven't won. Or if you want the really brutal translation, it would go something like, I am bored now. This is not playing well in the polls. I'd like to declare victory and walk away. But it seems I have broken something. And by the way, why do they call it a strait when it's shaped like a U-bend? A problem which may be painful to fix. So why don't we risk some non-American ships? British ships or French ships or whatever, so I don't get the blame in the midterm elections. Now, here to remind you was Keir Starmer's response earlier today.
First, we will protect our people in the region. Second, while taking the necessary action to defend ourselves and our allies, we will not be drawn into the wider war. And third, we will keep working towards a swift resolution.
Well, that was remarkably polite. He'd just had a call with President Trump and hadn't given way. Now, of course, we all need the oil to flow again and prices to come down, so this is not a decision necessarily forever. Meanwhile, India, unlike the US, has been negotiating with Tehran, and their ships are getting through. The Chinese may well become involved, which would be a humiliation for the United States. But I don't want to end by suggesting that Britain is blameless here. The long delay in sending HMS Dragon was a national embarrassment. If it was caused by ministerial dithering, that is very bad. Although it should not obscure the wider truth that our Navy, like the rest of our armed forces, has been hollowed out by Tory, coalition and Labour governments for decades. Turning that round would require a government clear-sighted enough to reconfigure itself as a government of national defence and security. But I don't see anyone anywhere in British politics big enough to do that. Oh dear. Let's hear first tonight from the award-winning author and commentator Anne Applebaum. Did she think Britain has an obligation to respond when President Trump asks for help?
First of all, NATO is a defensive alliance. Britain is a part of NATO. The United States is a part of NATO. Germany, the rest of European countries are parts of NATO, and they have agreed to ally when they are attacked and to come to one another's defense. They have not agreed to aid one another in wars of choice in other parts of the world. So I don't think Britain is under any treaty obligation to help the United States in this difficulty that it has created. And I don't think Britain needs to apologize for that.
We are all having to deal with an unusual president, put it that way. And he has said it will be very bad for NATO if countries like Britain don't get involved. How serious do you think that threat is?
So it's a very strange thing to say. Again, the United States is a part of NATO. It created NATO. It's been the leader of NATO. The supreme commander of NATO is always an American. So for Trump to talk about NATO as if it were some other body that will be in trouble if he decides it will be in trouble is peculiar and shows that he doesn't really understand how the alliance works. His tools for harming NATO are limited. He's already threatened to invade a NATO country in the past year. He's put tariffs on European countries who are members of NATO. He has stopped sending money and equipment to Ukraine, which is an important concern for NATO members. I mean, there's not that much more he can do to NATO in the current circumstances.
We talk a lot about so-called asymmetric warfare, and really going back to Vietnam and even to a certain extent Korea, traditional big armies have struggled with insurgencies and unexpected forms of terrorism as well. Do you feel that in some respects the United States has got itself into an asymmetric fight in Iran, which, despite the pounding from the air that Iran has received, is going to be very, very hard for them to walk away from?
So it was an asymmetric fight from the beginning, and it was also a very strange war plan, one that wasn't explained to Americans, it wasn't explained to Congress. It was never sold to allies or explained really to the outside world, let alone to international institutions. We don't even think about that anymore. But because of that, we're not even sure what the war is for. Is the war to change the regime in Iran? Is the war to destroy Iran's nuclear capability or its missile capability? Many of those things may have been done already. So it's not clear anymore what it is the United States wants to achieve. And really, that's the reason why it's hard to get out, because Trump needs to declare victory, but how does he declare victory when it's not clear even to him what his war aims are? I mean, I wouldn't exclude the possibility that the regime in Iran will be weakened and that there could be some change inside the country. And that actually is my hope as to what's going to happen, because that would be the best for the Iranian people. But it's clear that Trump hasn't done anything to encourage that or to make that happen, or even has thought much about who might be the alternative leaders of Iran.
And then, of course, there is also the Strait of Hormuz problem we've talked about before on the show. Obviously, voters around the world will want the strait to be reopened as soon as possible, the oil price to start to come down because of the effect on them. Doesn't that give countries like Britain, Germany, indeed Japan and others, a really difficult choice? In other words, they don't feel that they are obliged by treaty to support the Americans. They may feel the Americans want to put their vessels, non-American vessels, in harm's way rather than American vessels ahead of the midterms. But at the same time, they need the strait to be unblocked.
Of course, we need the strait to be unblocked. And I assume that Britain, like Japan, like China, actually, and like France and other countries who depend on oil that comes through the strait, are thinking now about what it is they might do. But obviously, until the situation is clearer, until people are sure that, you're not on a suicide mission. I mean, nobody's obligated to send a ship through a strait in order for it to be blown up. Until that situation has cleared up, I don't see what there is that anybody can do. Maybe down the road, in some defensive capacity, there will be an argument for other countries guarding ships in the strait or negotiating with Iran to make sure they can go through the strait. I don't know. But certainly right now, at this moment, I don't see that there are a lot of options open.
And thank you very much indeed for joining LBC.
Thank you.
And now for a slightly different view, let's hear from the former Foreign Secretary and one-time contender to be Conservative leader, Jeremy Hunt. Was Keir Starmer not right, I asked him, to hold firm given everything that the President has said?
Well, politics is about making difficult choices, and this is one of those moments. And by refusing to allow the Americans to use our bases, even though they weren't asking us to take part in the conflict, but they just wanted to use our bases, we have no influence at all. We could have, for example, had conversations with them that said, do you realize the risks of the Straits of Hormuz being permanently closed, which is now what the world is contending with. And we have no influence. We've traditionally had influence in Washington. But I think the really important thing to remember is, much as many people will be very frustrated with Donald Trump and sort of want to say, we told you so when he asks for help. The truth is that we need America to defend Europe today. American taxpayers are paying for about a third of the cost of defending Europe. And when Donald Trump makes threats to NATO, we know it's not saber rattling. So I think the bigger national interest here, very bluntly, is to try to hold NATO together until Europe is able to stand on its own 2 feet in terms of defence. And that's why, however difficult and challenging it is, we have got to be realistic about the need to maintain some level of cooperation with the United States.
In brief, eat crow in the short term, at least.
Well, in a way, yes. In a way, that's what you have to do in diplomacy. You have to do things. I mean, it might feel very good to give a speech like Mark Carney gave at Davos. But if the result of Britain doing that is that America says, actually, we're going to switch off intelligence support for Ukraine, or we're going to withdraw from NATO's European command structures because we want to concentrate on China. If that happened, we would soon think that we had been pretty stupid.
I guess the big question in all of that is, do we believe that Donald Trump still has our backs anyway, is really in it for Ukraine anyway, or do we think that he has perhaps flipped to the Russians or flipped to a much more Russia-friendly position? And the prospect of us losing Royal Naval vessels and Royal Naval personnel to protect him and to ensure that he does better politically in the short term in the United States is just unacceptable, one step too far.
Well, I don't think we do think he has our backs. But that doesn't mean he couldn't do a lot more damage. And how would we feel? I mean, we're now having an argument in the UK in a very British sort of way about whether we should increase defence spending from 2.5% of GDP to 3%. If Russia prevails in Ukraine because America needs all its Patriot missile systems in the Middle East, because it stops sharing intelligence, we'll be having a discussion about whether we need to be spending 8 or 10% of GDP on defence. So, we are paying the price for the fact that we don't stand on our own 2 feet in defence terms. And until such time as we do, I'm afraid we are going to have to continue walking this tightrope.
And that, we both know, this goes back 2 decades or more in terms of endless cuts. Really, actually, since the end of the Second World War, it's been a downward trajectory, but worse since the end of the Cold War. Governments of all stripes have been involved. Do you look around today? I don't see anybody really in British politics who has the courage to take the decisions necessary to get us up to the kind of defence spending we're going to need.
Well, I have to say that it was too late, but I think the last government did make a start. And when I was Chancellor, we made the decision to increase it to 2.5%. In retrospect, that doesn't seem enough. But yes, I think what we did was we thought there was this big peace dividend after the fall of the Berlin Wall. What we didn't think hard enough about was that President Trump would speed this whole process up. And that's what's really happened. And I think we now have to recognize that until we are able to defend ourselves, we are going to get pushed around by the United States, indeed by other powers. And that's a very bad place to be. And so, yes, we need courage from Keir Starmer. We need courage, by the way, from opposition parties to say that, we will support you
to actually back him on this kind of thing,
these difficult decisions. And given the state of public finances, that's going to have knock-on effects. It's going to mean things like, welfare reform become even more important. But I don't think we've got any time to waste.
because just picking up from that final point, the country's mood still seems, as it were, pacific or non-defence focused, or however you describe it. So when you talk about things like the need to look at welfare reform, look at the number of people taking benefits because they've got relatively minor illnesses of one kind or another, when you think about things like the triple lock and pensioners, there's some really brutal decisions. And again, do you see anybody around the shop who's ready to take those decisions yet, from the right or the left?
Well, I do think actually the Conservative Party has been saying some home truths on these issues recently.
Not the triple lock.
But I would just say maybe that one's to come. Who knows? But I would make this point. We don't have very much time. And if there is one country in Europe where you can win that argument, it is actually the UK. And this is one of those areas where actually we have influence beyond our shores. I think if other European countries, particularly France and Germany, see the UK stepping up. I mean, the French hate the thought of being left behind us. And at the moment, if anything,
we're behind them, actually. Yeah,
exactly. So I think we can have a lot of influence.
OK, final, very straightforward question. In these new circumstances, if you had the power to do so, would you ditch the triple lock in order to increase defence spending?
Without giving you a politician's answer, I do think all these options should be on the table, specifically with the triple lock. It was put in place to make sure we avoid pensioner poverty. We used to have a big problem with pensioner poverty. I don't think you can just remove it. I think you have to come up with a broader plan that says, look, this was the intention, to make sure pensioners don't get left behind. And this is a different way to do it. And I think, as with all these things, I think the argument I would make to pensioners is, if we are actually paying for the triple lock by increasing our national debt, which is the net effect of this very generous pension scheme, that means your children and grandchildren are actually paying the price for your generous pensions. Is that really what you want? And I think it is possible to win the argument for all welfare reform. And I think that, pensioner benefits are part of that.
I think that argument has to be one. Jeremy Hunt, thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
And coming up, you're going to hear from a man who cold called the White House to get those searing remarks from President Trump about the special relationship. That's next. Time now, 6:19. 6:21. Let's turn now to the man who got those latest Trump quotes on NATO for his newspaper by simply picking up the phone and calling the president. Edward Luce, the FT's top man in Washington. Edward, great to have you on the show. Before we get into the meat of it, have you tried to call President Trump before? Does he genuinely pick up the phone himself? What goes on?
I've tried 3 or 4 times, and this was, I guess, the 4th or 5th. I can't remember. I did text him in the meantime. I wasn't expecting him to answer when he did answer, but he nevertheless did.
He clearly wants to get this message out and get it out loud. Do you get the impression that he's feeling the heat politically, internally about this war? In other words, he's looking at the polls and beginning to worry about how he gets out of it?
Very much so. I mean, he's clearly deeply stressed about the direction of this war. And I think in full recognition of the fact that there is no easy exit or off-ramp, and that he's going to need everybody's help, including not just NATO partners, but like Britain, but also China, where he has a summit in a couple of weeks that he also told me he was thinking about delaying. So the fact, lots of things were on my bingo card and your bingo card, Andrew, for 2026. One of them was not Donald Trump asking China to send a naval deployment to the Middle East.
If that happened, surely it'd be a massive humiliation for the United States. There's their great sort of strategic rival or enemy in some people's views coming into an area which has traditionally been in their backyard.
Yes, this would be humiliation. I think perhaps less humiliating than Trump going to Beijing for this summit with Xi Jinping and asking for repeating that request to him face to face, because I think it's pretty clear China has no intention of sending minesweepers or any other assets to the Middle East. This is Trump's war. He broke it. He owns it.
Absolutely. When you look at the importance of the Strait of Hormuz, Trump said today that, everybody who benefits from the oil coming through should be involved in helping keep it open. But that effectively means the entire world economy. So he's making this request in many different directions. But so far, Japan, Germany, Italy, he's getting no, 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 and Britain too.
He's getting a lot of no's. I mean, it's not that China and everybody else doesn't want to see oil prices come down. This clearly harms every country, every economy. But it's that there's no real guarantee that President Trump can provide that their ships in that waterway, that narrow choke point, would be safe. And I think also from the point of view of America's adversaries, China foremost, they don't really want to help him out of a dilemma that is entirely self-created.
Of his own making. And again, you're sitting in Washington, you're looking at the wider picture. Are we seeing what we call sometimes the middle powers, that is India, who've done a deal with Tehran already, and Turkey, moving into the kind of diplomatic and strategic gap being left by Trump politics?
Yes, and what's amazing is how easily they can do so. I think since the start of this war 16, 17 days ago, 13 Iranian supertankers have been allowed unmolested to leave Karg Island and go through the Strait of Hormuz to their export destination, whether that be India or China or elsewhere, because the Americans know that if they hinder Iranian exports, the very exports that are helping fuel that what remains of that regime, then they would push the global oil price up even further, which would make Trump's dilemma even deeper.
Absolutely. Final question. I don't mean this in a trivial way, but listening to what he said to you about NATO and the prospect being very bad for NATO, do you think Donald Trump sometimes confuses NATO with Europe?
I think he confuses it serially, yes. I mean, NATO, as you know, is a mutual defense pact, which means an attack on one is an attack on all. It does not mean that it's available to help with an attack that has happened unilaterally outside of the NATO area. So it's really quite the opposite of what NATO was founded to do.
Yeah.
But I think Trump has always seen it really as an American-led club that should do America's bidding. And I suspect he's going to find out, not for the first time, that it isn't.
Ed Luce, great to talk to you, and congratulations on that phone call and that scoop. Thank you very much indeed. Now then, here, ministers announced another drive to get young people into work, offering government-subsidised jobs as part of a fresh push on welfare reform. Unless the government's able to cut the welfare bill, which is around $330 billion a year at the moment, rising to $407 billion by the end of this parliament, we can kiss goodbye to any thought of proper defences. I'm joined now by Diana Johnson, the Minister for Employment. Minister, can I ask you, first of all, about that big increase in overall welfare spending between now and the end of the parliament? Is there any world in which that comes down?
Well, look, we inherited the welfare system that was created by the previous government. I think we all recognise it's not working as we want it to. It means too many people are written off. Too many people are told if they have a health condition, that's it. You won't be able to work ever again. When we know lots of people with health conditions want to work if they're given the right support. And for young people in particular, we know that we've got a generation almost, nearly 1 million young people not in earning or learning at the moment. We've got to do something about them and get them into work. So the Secretary of State talks about moving from a welfare state to a working state with the right support.
Well, that would be great. But to make those changes, every time you make those changes, you have to spend some money to do it. And therefore, the overall bill goes up. What I'm asking is, because of those changes, do you believe the bill will come down during this Parliament?
Well, what I'm really concerned about is giving people opportunities to work, to earn a living for themselves, to get the pride that comes through with work. Now, if people are doing that, then inevitably they will be paying national insurance and they'll be paying tax, and they won't be necessarily claiming benefits. Although what we do know is that with universal credit, there are lots of people who claim universal credit but are in work as well, but they need help to meet their bills. So there is a bit of an issue there, and that's why we've got our proposal around making work pay, and you'll know that the national minimum wage will be going up next month.
Yes, very important stuff. Let me ask you about the big story of the day as well, if I may. Prime Minister has been very, very clear that he does not want to get drawn into the American war in Iran. However, if the Strait of Hormuz remains blocked by the Iranians, then people up and down the country are going to suffer even more from the cost of living crisis. They won't be able to pay bills. They'll be worried about their heating, their energy costs, and the rest of it. Now, of course, the Prime Minister wants to do what he can to bring those bills down, but it's very difficult. You have very little money to do that. Therefore, are there circumstances in which, because of the economic impact of all of this, Britain would get involved in trying to open that strait?
Well, you've set out there the position of the Prime Minister in saying we were not part of the offensive, part of the conflict, but we will defend our interests. We will defend the people who live in the region are British citizens. So on that particular point, I know that the Prime Minister is working with allies to look at all options. I think it would be wrong for me to try and suggest any operational decisions that have been made or not been made, because that would offer succour really to the Iranians. But I know that they are working together with allies on this particular point. And the other thing to say, of course, is the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have acted very quickly because of the cost of living issue today, announcing support for those who use oil for heating, because there's a real issue there that's developed in recent days.
But we could see going forward Britain with other countries going in to try to unblock that strait.
Well, I can't say, although what I can say is that they are working across the allies to look at what's in the best interests of Britain. That has to be what the Prime Minister's made clear from the start. What's in our best interests?
All right, Diana Johnson, thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking to LBC. There has been an awful meningitis outbreak in the southeast. We're going to be talking to LBC's reporter there and an expert on the disease as well. But the time now, 6:30, and Amelia Cox has your news headlines.
Former Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt has told LBC Donald Trump could inflict even more damage on NATO's interests if we don't back him. Speaking on Tonight with Andrew Marr, he says we have to be realistic about the need to maintain some cooperation with the US over the war with Iran. A second man has been released without charge after 4 men were arrested on suspicion of spying for Iran. It related to suspected surveillance of people and places linked to the Jewish community in London. And the University of Kent has cancelled all in-person exams following an outbreak of meningitis, which led to the deaths of 2 young people. A Year 13 student in Faversham and a student at the university have died as a result. LBC weather: rain easing across much of the UK tonight with patchy light rain in the west, lows of 6 degrees.
This is LBC.
Tesco Insurance are driving down the cost of motoring with 10% off car insurance. Take out a car insurance policy before the 15th of May 2026 and you'll get 10% off with club card prices. We offer a range of cover options, so you can choose the one that's right for you. Save 10% when you buy or renew a car policy with Tesco Insurance. Search Tesco Car Insurance and get a quote direct today. Club card required. Excludes add-ons. T's and C's apply.
This is 40-year-old Kathy, mother of 2 and self-confessed telly-addict.
Oh, look at you. That's brilliant. Well done.
This is also Kathy, working as part of a team to keep things calm at her local prison.
Listen, speak to me.
And helping someone's son write his first letter home in 8 months.
Well done. You should be really proud.
Thank you, miss. An extraordinary job, done by someone like you. Search prison jobs now.
Interactive Investor would like to say welcome and thank you. Welcome to all our new investors who joined us over the past few months, and thank you to a certain competitor that decided to change their fee structure and sent them all our way. Visit Interactive Investor to see what you could save with our low flat fee. Interactive Investor. I think, therefore I. Remember, when investing, your capital is at risk.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:33. There has been a horrible outbreak of meningitis, which is a horrible disease, at the University of Kent. 2 people, sadly, have died, and 11 more are seriously ill. Let's hear first from LBC's reporter Emma Corr, who's more for us. Emma.
Andrew, the scene at the University of Kent campus today was so reminiscent of those scenes from 6 years ago. Hundreds of people queuing up, wearing masks, spaced meters apart to collect the preventative antibiotics they're being offered following this rare meningitis outbreak. We learned this morning a 6th former at Queen Elizabeth Grammar School in Faversham had died and named by the school as Juliet. And it was confirmed yesterday a student at the University of Kent had also died from the infection. The UK Health Security Agency say 11 other people are seriously ill in hospital with symptoms consistent with meningitis. One school in Ashford confirming one of their Year 13 pupils is ill with the infection. It's students who share accommodation with these cases, people from the local community, people at the same schools have been arriving on campus to collect antibiotics, and I've been speaking to some of them.
I'm concerned for myself and my family. I just want to keep myself safe.
I just think it's quite a scary thing as well, because obviously 2 people have already died from it, and it was only just reported yesterday, so we don't actually know how long it's been kind of in the area.
We're obviously a bit worried, but we're feeling that the authorities are trying to do as much possible as they can to sort the situation out, so we just listen to the guidelines, see what they say to do. We're more here to be safe than sorry, you know.
I'm worried because I have a weak immune system, so I'm trying to get home as quick as possible, really.
At this stage, we've been told the strain of the bacteria for this outbreak hasn't yet been identified, and that's also why precautions are being taken. Public health expert Professor Bharat Pankania has told LBC what the authorities will be doing to help contain this.
We just don't give them antibiotics and say goodbye. We keep a close eye on them. We inform, advise and educate them. But essentially what we need to do is find the close contacts, and we may extend that ring, which is close contacts and then closer contacts.
The UK Health Security Agency is urging anyone who develops symptoms of meningitis or blood poisoning, a high fever, being sick, a severe or worsening headache, a rash which doesn't fade, to seek urgent medical care. There really does seem to be a huge amount of concern here over this rare outbreak, not just affecting the university, which does remain open, but this whole community in Kent, the surrounding towns and villages of Canterbury too, and particularly schools in the area, closely monitoring the situation.
LBC's Emma Corr there. And listening to that, here with me in the studio is Dr. Emma Wall, Clinical Research Group Leader at the Francis Crick Institute and Professor of Clinical Infectious Diseases at Queen Mary University of London. Professor, I'm ashamed with all your titles to ask you such a simple question, but what is meningitis?
So the easiest way to understand meningitis, Andrew, is to think of our skulls are a fixed box and our brain inside is a nice jelly. And to keep it in place and to have shock absorbers, we have the meninges, the linings of the brain, and they're filled with fluid to act as a shock absorber to keep our brain safe as we move around. Meningitis is when that fluid gets infected, either by a bacteria or a virus, and that causes the brain to become swollen and very irritable, giving rise to the classic syndrome, which is a high fever, a headache that won't go away with paracetamol, a stiff neck, and sometimes a rash.
And it can lead to terrible, terrible outcomes, including death.
Yes.
Now, I've noticed that meningitis often appears around universities and students. Why is that?
So meningitis is a bug that lives in our nose and throats, and many of us will have it without knowing it. But when students and young people come together in places like colleges and universities, spreading close contact droplets, we call it kissing contacts traditionally in medicine, close people, then that bacteria can spread. And then for some reasons in people who are probably a bit more susceptible and who haven't had a vaccine, that bug can then become invasive, go into the bloodstream, into the brain with very rapid and devastating consequences. And I'm very sad about these 2 young people who've died. It's tragic.
It's very, very sad. And is this also because very often young students have got a lot of stress in their lives, and perhaps their immune systems are lower than they'd be otherwise?
Definitely. We know when students, particularly freshers, are mixing, they're often not eating as well as they would at home. They might be sleeping a bit less well. They might have exam or study pressures, and they're often contained together in lecture theatres or halls for periods of time where these bugs can spread.
Now, we don't know what this new strain is. Emma Corr was just telling us just now. But the good news is that there is a vaccine.
Yes, so this meningococcus is exquisitely sensitive to antibiotics when they're given early. So the most important thing is people who are feeling like they're more unwell than usual. The thing to remember also is that the symptoms don't all come in a triad. If you're not feeling well, you're not right, you're not sure, seek medical help, even if you don't have one of the cardinal symptoms. But yes, the disease is prevented by vaccines, and actually they're some of the most extraordinarily successful in vaccines we have. And the thing for the audience to remember is that these vaccines are offered as a booster in year 9 to all children in the UK to protect against exactly this type of outbreak. And so if your child hasn't had a vaccine, they're available up until the age of 24. You just need to see your GP, make an appointment to get yourself topped up.
And Emma was just saying just now, the scenes were rather reminiscent of COVID, with people with masks and so on.
Yes.
Of course, one of the things that happened at the time of COVID was quite a lot of anti-vax sentiment. Don't get the vaccine. They're not telling you all the truth. What would you say to young people, as it were, influenced or susceptible to those kind of arguments?
So I would say that I did my PhD in a meningitis endemic country in Africa where there is no anti-vax sentiment because everybody sees children dying of meningitis every year. We know the reason that we are frightened of meningitis is because even as children and young adults, we saw people die of this disease. It has been virtually eradicated through successful and highly powerful and safe vaccines that are given to young children and babies. And I would encourage anybody to look at all the available information that's out there, but the best thing you can do to protect yourself is get one of these highly effective vaccines.
A very, very important message, Dr. Emma Wall. Thank you so much for coming into LBC and
Pleasure.
Now, there's been a rather intriguing row between Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK, and the pollsters YouGov, who Reform say have been underestimating their support in the country. Mr. Farage declared victory today. The pollsters from now on will publish more data. But there's more to the story than that. In a moment, we're going to hear from Peter Kellner, the political commentator and former president of YouGov. But first, fresh from a Reform press conference earlier today, LBC's deputy political editor, Aggie Chambray. Aggie, you asked, first of all, about Richard Tice's tax arrangements, because there have been a report that he hasn't paid as much tax as he might have done.
That's completely right, Andrew. So in this press conference, Richard Tice, before he even turned to questions, defended his tax arrangements because the Sunday Times reported yesterday that he'd avoided nearly £600,000 in corporation tax through his property company. He'd used this sort of rare legal status known as a real estate investment trust. He doesn't appear to have broken any laws or criminally underpaid tax. But his argument seemed to be that everyone in the UK now wants you to pay as much tax as you possibly can. So I asked whether or not he thought that everyone should pay the minimum amount of tax possible.
Just on tax, it sounds like what you're saying, and it'd be great for you to clarify. Would you encourage everyone to pay as little tax as possible if that's sort of within the legal limits?
Yes, within the legal, by the legal limit, of course.
So
that's what you should do.
So you would encourage everyone in the UK to pay little tax as they
pay what you should
can.
legally pay, what you're legally obliged to pay. Don't morally or voluntarily give more tax to incompetent, wasteful, hard-left socialist governments to waste on your behalf. Definitely not.
So that would be Reform's policy in government. If Reform is in government,
if you want to pay more tax, if your wonderful LBC viewers and listeners want to pay more tax, good luck to them. I suspect they all agree with me. I suspect they'll all say, I'll pay what I'm legally required to pay.
So Richard Tice there speaking at the press conference. He also denied that his scheme, of which there are about 200 operating in the UK, was specialist or beyond the use of less rich taxpayers, basically saying anyone could invest in these. Labour, we've got a quote from a spokesperson. They say Richard Tice is brazenly attempting to deflect from his own tax affairs by slinging mud and hoping something will stick. They go on to say he needs to explain to the British people why he's gone to such extreme lengths to avoid paying almost £750,000 in tax.
Well, there's a controversy that people will be arguing up and down the country about almost immediately. Aggie, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's get more now on the Reform polling row, however, with the former president of YouGov, Peter Kellner. Peter, great to have you on the show again. The argument is really about how YouGov tries to make the best estimate of how people will vote in a general election. Can you explain to us what the row is about?
I'll explain it in a second, but let me just say, Reform is doing some deflection here. The real polling story of the last 6 months is that Reform support has fallen by something like 5 percentage points, which, when you're around 28, 30%, is a lot. And YouGov says it's down about 5 or 6 points. All the other companies say it's down 5 or 6 points. That's the big story. Now, what are Reform complaining about? The latest Reform YouGov poll last week had Reform on 23%. All the other companies have Reform in the high 20s, 27, 28, 29%. And the reason is this. YouGov starts by asking people the normal question: how would you vote if there were a general election tomorrow? And they get more or less the same figures as everybody else. Right. They then go on to ask a second question: how would you vote in your constituency? And that's when people say something a bit different. Some people then fall away from Reform. Lib Dems do a bit better, and then they do some alchemy with their formula around modelling how people actually vote and come up with a final figure. And that final figure is around 4 or 5 points below the conventional first figure.
And so this is really trying to account for tactical voting or anti-reform voting at the moment, because there is quite a big anti-reform sentiment in the country as well. And
tactical voting, and then a question of whether all the people who say they vote will vote. The fact that most polls have twice as many women who say don't know as men, and all the evidence we have is that women don't actually vote less than men. They just say don't know more to pollsters. You've got to take into account all these things. And I've been looking at the general election figures, and YouGov got Reform spot on a couple of years ago. Most of the other polls overstated Reform, not by a great deal, but they overstated Reform. So YouGov, who are using the method now that they used at the last general election, do have on their side that their formula got it right last time.
But they're going to publish, as it were, the raw data and the single question data alongside each other now.
Yes, and reports today rather mix this up, Andrew. YouGov are not changing the way they present their headline voting intention. That will stay as it is with all the formula and all the tweaks. But they're simply going to, when they publish their tables, they're going to add another bit of the table saying this is what we get on the first question, the conventional question, and that shows Reform higher than the headline figure.
And Peter, for people listening and thinking, oh, this is all about numbers, it's very technical and not really important, presumably the argument is that it's extremely important for Nigel Farage and Reform to maintain the sense of ever upwards, a kind of helium-filled movement upwards, and therefore the pollsters which show them in the worst position are actually damaging them with potential newspaper supporters, donors, voters, and the rest of it.
Absolutely. That's why the significant thing is all the pollsters, YouGov and all the others, all show Reform down a few points from where they were in the autumn.
Let me ask you, since I've got you here, Peter, and you're an authority on polling, what's going on with the Prime Minister's popularity over Iran? Because he seems to have had a little bit of a bump upwards as a result of taking on Donald Trump, or not agreeing with Donald Trump anyway.
There does seem to be a slight rise. His ratings have been terrible. And people's views of the Iran war, he is representing with the public thing. The public on the whole think we should not have gone in with the Americans and the Israelis on the attack on Iran, but they do think we should use what weapons we have at our disposal to defend British people, British assets, British troops. I think the problem is that Keir Starmer would be getting more benefits from his stand on Iran if his own ratings for honesty, strength, competence and so on weren't so terrible. If those ratings were better, I think he'd be getting a bigger bounce from Iran than he is getting.
Which leads me inevitably to the next question, Peter, one you've heard before, I suspect, which is it possible for a Prime Minister performing so badly on those core questions about character and competence and so forth to come back?
It's never happened before, but is there a first time? History is against Keir Starmer, but so much is happening now that history has no precedent for in terms of our multi-party conflict. So I'm going, if I may, elegantly half-duck your question.
Fair point. Final question, however. Now with 5 parties more or less bunched around similar kinds of polling numbers, some going up and down, overtaking each other the whole time, is it becoming ever harder, I'm not going to say impossible, but very, very difficult for pollsters to predict final general election numbers with those number of parties all vying in so many seats?
I mean, it's immensely difficult to predict anything 3 years out, but it's made doubly difficult by the fact that when you've got parties jostling around, the low, high 20s and so on, there are going to be a lot of very close contests. So not only is it getting the numbers, the voting numbers right, getting the votes to seats numbers right, and then there's the impact of tactical voting. Will that be big or not as big as some people say? So at the moment, it really, really is a lottery.
Well, as the young people would say, an absolute mare. Peter Kellner, thank you very much indeed for joining me tonight. Now, are the Oscars outdated? The annual awards saw wins for films like One Battle After Another and Sinners. But how many people were actually watching the awards? I'll be discussing more about that next. The time now, 6:48.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
The closure of the Strait of Hormuz would bring havoc to the world economy as a key trading route. Should Britain and NATO supply ships to help Donald Trump defend it?
Ian Dale at 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Jay here knows that Zoopla can provide valuations for any home in the UK, so we can see what that new couple across the road might have paid.
Ooh la la.
Have a nose at what the curtain twitchers next door could sell for. And even see what his own place is worth.
Cool, look at that.
Plus, Zoopla lets you find and compare local estate agents if you do decide to sell up. Think of all those new neighbours you'll be able to snoop on, Jay. If you want to know, just ask Zoopla.
So, what's on your to-do list today? Why don't you check if you're eligible for pension credit? It tops up your pension income and also opens up help with heating bills, council tax, and more. Search pension credit on gov.uk or call 0800 99 1234. There's nothing to lose. Check today. Pension credit. Credit where credit's due. Eligibility criteria apply.
Sorry to interrupt your day, but I've just been diagnosed with dementia, and I'm going to need your help. I'll need help when I can no longer button a shirt or recognize my own family. My daughter will need help too. I worry this could ruin her life. And we will all need help to find a cure to end the devastation of dementia. I can't do this alone.
It will take a society to beat dementia. Alzheimer's Society.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC. Tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:50. And back to our top story tonight. You might conclude from all of this that under Trump, NATO is pretty much a dead letter. And if we want to defend ourselves with a nuclear deterrent, we're going to have our own. But is that remotely practical, and wouldn't it be fabulously expensive? The idea has been targeted by the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, who joined me earlier on. Did he think we had to completely rethink our so-called independent nuclear deterrent?
I think we do have to review the way we've operated it for the last several decades because of Donald Trump. If we do have an unreliable ally in the White House, and we've never really thought about that would be the case before, then the fact that they could undermine our deterrent, refuse to maintain it, not help us with all the systems that go around the missile, would completely mean that our missile and our deterrent was no longer valid.
And for people listening, it's the case that the submarines are ours and the warheads are ours, but the missiles, you say, are not.
That's right. We're currently manufacturing the new Dreadnought submarines, which will carry the future missiles. They're being made at Barrow-in-Furness. We'll be manufacturing the warhead in the UK. The bit that we'll have to manufacture and get ready, either late 30s, probably early 40s, is the actual missile. The replacement of Trident.
And at the moment, that comes from America.
Yeah, we lease it from the United States, and they maintain it, and with some of the operation systems behind it. And I'm saying we should do that ourselves, like the French do, like we used to do. And that means taking a decision now to make sure you've got the capabilities to do that.
Are we still able to make it ourselves?
Yes, of course we could. We've got great engineers, great scientists, great builders. And if you take the decision now, you can build up that capability to do it when we need to do it in about a decade and a half's time.
So what would be the cost, and where would the money come from?
Well, first of all, we're going to have to pay for the American missiles anyway. So we're going to have to pay that money and give it to the United States. What I'm saying is we give that money to British companies and invest it in our own economy. Now, that may cost some more. It's a bit difficult to work out how much it would be, not least because it's a long way off. Plus, who knows what an American president might charge for us. If it's a monopoly supplier, guess what? They may overcharge us. So I think the concept we're proposing means that not only would our deterrent genuinely be independent of a future Trump-like president, but it would also help our economy grow.
But on the other hand, it would still be dependent, wouldn't it, on the American guidance system, the satellite targeting system. All of that is still American. So would we not actually still be tied into them?
No, that would be part of what I'm proposing. The French,
a new targeting system as well, satellite system.
Yeah, the French aren't dependent on the United States. They have a sovereign, independent nuclear deterrent. If the French can do it, so can the British.
Is this part of, let's be candid, breaking up NATO if necessary?
No, you can see these nuclear deterrents within the context of NATO. The French see that. They see it in the context of the defence of Europe and other NATO members. And I'm saying that we would do that as well. The real issue is the issue that's been posed by President Trump, who has attacked NATO allies, has not behaved in any predictable, reliable way, and seems to undermine some of his closest historical allies. And we cannot depend on him. So I'm actually, this is quite a difficult decision. I've arrived at it quite reluctantly. But I think one party has to speak out from this. We have to push the government to take this seriously, to ask why they're not taking this decision, and expose other parties who seem to be willing to be completely dependent and reliant on the United States.
And to be clear, if you were in number 10 and Donald Trump said, I want Royal Naval ships to help unblock the Strait of Hormuz now, what would you say? Would you say no?
I'd say let's take it to the UN Security Council, make sure there's an international coalition behind this. That would mean it was separated from his illegal attack on Iran, and it would be for the good of the world, not just for President Trump.
So you basically stand shoulder to shoulder with Keir Starmer on this issue?
Well, Keir Starmer's not played the way I would have done. He was saying that he would help the US and
in a defensive capacity.
In a defensive capacity. And just as he said that, Chancellor Merz of Germany said he wouldn't have anything to do with it. And I think, I'm not absolutely sure, but I think the Germans were essentially saying you need a broader international coalition, not just the United States, given they have started an offensive war.
So you would like Keir Starmer to go back to the UN?
I think it's essential. If we're going to make sure that the region supports this action, that European and Commonwealth allies support this action, I don't think we should be jumping at the behest of President Trump. It is vital to protect our oil supplies. Of course it is. But the way we're proposing would be a better way. Actually, the best way is to have a diplomatic solution to end this war.
Sir Ed Davey, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The Oscars has long been a big night of celebration for filmmakers and actors, and also for viewers at home. The award ceremony last night, however, seemed predictable, tasteless, and even a bit boring. Are the Oscars toddling off towards irrelevancy? Anna Smith, film critic, broadcaster, and the host of Girls on Film podcast, joins me now. Anna, thanks for that. Lots of preening, quite a bit of sobbing, but this is in the end. This is people who are very, very well paid, are privileged and successful people giving each other gongs. And I wonder whether the rest of the world is getting a bit tired of it.
Well, it's interesting. I absolutely take your point. From the outside, it can seem that way. But when you think of some of the, the short filmmakers, the documentary makers, these aren't all privileged people. A lot of them are actually people that believe really passionately in a cause and have actually put their lives on the line to make films. So, of course, you have the glittering dresses and the red carpet. But a lot of these films mean something to people, not just the people who made them, but the people who watched them. I think great art is a wonderful way to escape. And I think we saw quite a lot of great art rewarded last night myself.
Well, I certainly hugely enjoyed the film that scooped all those gongs one after another, one fight after another. One battle after another. That one. Yeah, I like that. But I always wonder about these things. By the time the ceremony takes place, the films have been in and out of cinemas. Some will still be streamed and so forth. But it's a bit late. So it's not an occasion which persuades people to go and see a film they might not otherwise have seen, is it really?
Well, Debatable. I think sometimes they are re-released in cinemas afterwards, so people will have the opportunity to do that if they get a resurgence in interest. And if they seek them out online, then they're still seeking them out. You know, you're still drawing people to the screen experience and to storytelling. So I think it's certainly beneficial for the film industry, and I hope that it's beneficial for people who might discover something that they hadn't heard of. And a number of people have said to me, "Oh gosh, I must now watch Sinners. I've been meaning to get around to it." You know,
that's a fair point.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a grim, wrinkled old curmudgeon who goes to bed early, but I think you stayed up late for them. The number of people actually watching the ceremony is going down a bit, I think, isn't it, though?
It is in recent years. I mean, which is not particularly surprising when you think how much things are competing for everyone's attention, especially the younger people. You know, obviously you've got YouTube, Instagram, but in a couple of years' time, actually, the Oscars are going to go onto YouTube, and I think that will probably expand their audience again. But people are still tuning in, and there's been, you know, flutterings of interest on the social media today around lots of different things.
Sure. Well, YouTube is everybody's saviour these days. Anna Smith, thank you very much for talking to me. If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can also stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinion. Download the app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Ben Kentish. But right now, it's time for Ian Dale.
Thanks, Andrew.
I was very surprised.
Strait of Hormuz is threatening world trade and could have huge economic consequences. The US wants NATO ships to help keep it open. Is Keir Starmer right to resist Trump's demands to get this country's armed forces involved in policing this vital trading route? On Cross Question at 8,